In the heart of the Middle East, where the sands of time seemed to whisper secrets with every gust of wind, a lone archaeologist prepared for a discovery that would change his life forever. The scene was desolate, an excavation amid ancient ruins, but Khalil's determination was palpable. He was searching for something greater, something that defied the understanding of written history and could bring forgotten truths to light. Khalil adjusted his hat against the scorching sun as he watched the guillemot. Workers dig with their rudimentary tools. The raised dust danced in the air, creating an ethereal, almost magical atmosphere. For weeks, he had led this expedition in an area known for legends of giants and ancient gods. But until then, his searches had been limited to pottery fragments and animal bones. The hope of finding something more substantial seemed distant, but he knew that moving forward was the only way. However, on an ordinary day, while exploring a less accessible sector of the site, Khalil spotted something peculiar among the stones. A strange-looking object, covered by a thick layer of dirt and sand, caught his attention. His breath quickened as he approached, his hands, steady and decisive, slowly beginning to remove the grime. As the object began to reveal itself, an inexplicable sense of expectation and apprehension took hold of him. It was a stone tablet, larger than many he had found before, and its weight suggested it was a significant artifact. Khalil felt a wave of electricity run through his body as he looked at the intricate symbols covering its surface. The inscriptions were unlike any he had studied before, a mixture of archaic characters that seemed to pulsate with a forgotten history. Tracing his fingers over the letters, a chill down his spine reminded him that he was facing something that should not exist. Nephilim, he murmured in an almost inaudible whisper, the word echoing in the profound silence of the excavation. The mention of these beings, known from ancient scriptures, had always intrigued him, but now it seemed he had a concrete connection to them. He remembered the stories he had heard since childhood, tales full of mystery, speaking of giants, beings who crossed the boundaries of the divine and the human. Driven by curiosity, Khalil decided to work until nightfall. Darkness enveloped the site, but he didn't care. The challenge of deciphering the inscriptions and understanding what he was truly facing was more important. With every stroke he analyzed, the excitement grew. He knew that the Nephilim were often associated with myths and legends, but now, suddenly, they became more tangible, more real, as if the past were materializing before his eyes. Khalil was not just an archaeologist, he had always been an explorer. The desire to answer questions and unearth hidden truths guided him in every excavation. But now, a new obsession began to grip his mind, the quest to understand the message that this tablet might be conveying. What were the Nephilim, really? And why had their stories been silenced in the official historical narrative? As the full moon rose, illuminating the shadows of the fallen columns around, Khalil sensed the presence of something greater in the air. It was as if the silence of the night were whispering secrets to him, encouraging him to continue. He sat on a stone, his eyes fixed on the artifact. The feeling that he was on the verge of a monumental revelation made him pulse with adrenaline. The first chapters of humanity's story were written there, and he was about to unveil them. Khalil knew he might face resistance, not only from his academic colleagues, who might dismiss his theories as fantasies or speculations, but also from something far more sinister. The voices that wished the truth to remain hidden were strong. His heart raced at the idea that he was going beyond what most had ever dared to explore. The next day, as soon as the first morning light appeared, Khalil was ready. He headed to the university's archaeological library where he could research the references to the Nephilim further. The excitement pulsed within him like an electric current. What he was discovering was only the beginning. With every page he turned, a new connection formed. The stories of giants, of hybrid beings, and of a lost era intertwined in a mysterious tapestry that promised more revelations. Determination took hold of Khalil as he read about ancient traditions, the inscriptions from different cultures that mentioned these beings. What was once only a curiosity became a mission. He wanted to understand why the Nephilim were mentioned in the ancient scriptures and how their stories intertwined with the narrative of the flood, an event that, according to legends, was a divine response to the corruption brought by these beings. His eyes shone as he recalled that the flood was not just a story of destruction. It was a warning, an act of purification of something that had plagued humanity. He knew he was only starting, but the connection between the Nephilim and the reason for the flood was an enigma that demanded a deep dive into history, legends, and perhaps even faith itself. Khalil was determined. He would not stop until he discovered the whole truth about the Nephilim. As his obsession took hold of him, a new question formed in his mind. What price would he pay for this forbidden knowledge? Excitement and fear danced together as he prepared to explore the shadows of the past, aware that what was to come might not only change his life, but also the understanding of what humanity thought it knew about itself. The night advanced, enveloping the excavation in a cloak of mystery and shadows. Khalil, still absorbed in contemplation of the stone tablet, felt that every symbol engraved there was imbued with a lost meaning, a message crying out to be deciphered. The full moon, high in the sky, softly illuminated the archaeological site, creating a contrast between the shadows of the ancient pillars and the silvery clarity that danced over the rocks. He stood up, driven by an urgent need to understand what the Nephilim represented in this broader context of human history. Khalil's eyes searched the ancient texts, looking for patterns that might connect the Nephilim to the Sumerian accounts he vaguely knew. The ancient civilization of Sumer, considered one of the most advanced of its time, had left an impressive legacy of literature, including myths and epics that spoke of divine beings and entities interacting with humanity. With his mind buzzing with possibilities, Khalil decided it was time to delve deeper. He pulled a worn notebook from his backpack, its pages marked by notes and drafts from previous research. Those notes were the basis of his knowledge about the Anunnaki, the Sumerian gods who, according to legends, had descended to Earth and taught humans in various areas from agriculture to astronomy. The words seemed to come alive as he read. The Anunnaki were described as beings of great stature, possessing extraordinary abilities and establishing kingdoms among mortals. The connection between the Nephilim and the Anunnaki began to emerge in his mind like a tenuous but persistent thread. He remembered that the Nephilim were frequently mentioned in the sacred scriptures as the giants, those who inhabited the earth before the flood, beings who, with their strength and power, might have influenced humanity in ways we still don't fully comprehend. Khalil recalled a verse he had read during his student days. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. The passage resonated in his mind as he wondered, could the Nephilim, in fact, be descendants of the Anunnaki? At that moment, a sudden impulse of skepticism began to grip Khalil. He questioned whether the history he had been taught at the university was enough to explain the complexity of the human narrative. What was true? What evidence had been suppressed over the centuries? He remembered classes where archaeologists discussed the origin of civilization, always ignoring the possibility that beings of a different origin might have influenced human development. With renewed determination, Khalil stood up and walked toward the small nearby camp. Something inside him urged him to seek more information, to explore ancient documents that might be hidden in libraries or museums. He knew that the connection between the Nephilim and the Anunnaki could open new doors to understanding the dawn of humanity. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Khalil decided to venture to a nearby library, known for housing a vast collection of ancient texts and translations of Sumerian writings. The journey there was marked by anxiety and expectation. Every step he took seemed to lead him to a new revelation, a new layer of understanding that could change his destiny as an archaeologist and as a human being. Upon arriving at the library, he was greeted by an elderly librarian who seemed to know every corner and every book of that place. Khalil, with excitement pulsing in his veins, explained his mission and his search for texts mentioning the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. The man, with a thoughtful expression, led him to a hidden section where dusty books and papyrus scrolls awaited discovery. After hours of research, Khalil found a text that took his breath away. It was a translation of a fragment of a Sumerian epic that spoke about the creation of man and the intervention of the Anunnaki on Earth. The text described a narrative where the gods descended from the heavens and interacted directly with humans, shaping their lives and offering knowledge. The idea that these beings were not just mythological figures, but real entities, began to solidify in his mind. Khalil carefully noted every detail, every passage that might be relevant. The connection with the Nephilim became increasingly evident, but he knew he needed more proof, more evidence to support his theories. Determined, he decided to delve deeper into research about the civilizations that coexisted with the Sumerians, looking for vestiges that could corroborate the presence of the Nephilim and the Anunnaki. Back at the archaeological site, Khalil felt the energy of the place vibrating around him. The stone tablet he had found now seemed like a portal to a world of discoveries. With each passing day, the idea that conventional history might be wrong became more attractive and, at the same time, more terrifying. What else might the Nephilim have taught humans? What truths were hidden in the sands of time, waiting to be revealed? As the sun set, Khalil sat down again in front of the tablet, immersed in his reflections. The night, with its starry cloak, seemed to invite him to dream, but he knew that the reality he was about to unveil was even more fascinating than the deepest of fantasies. The Nephilim were not just a part of history. They were a key to understanding the very essence of humanity and its relationship with the divine. The search for that truth would take him to places he never imagined, and he was prepared to face any obstacle that arose in his path. What more would he discover about the Nephilim, and how far would this journey take him? Khalil closed his eyes for a moment, letting the gentle night breeze envelop him, a constant reminder that, even in the darkness, the answers were there, waiting to be discovered. The library was a labyrinth of knowledge, each corridor seeming to guard secrets that had been waiting for millennia to be revealed. Khalil, guided by the librarian, felt the excitement grow with every step toward the hidden section. He pondered what he might discover there. The connection between the Nephilim and the pyramids of Giza danced in his mind like a light at the end of the tunnel. The old librarian, with his penetrating gaze full of accumulated wisdom, stopped in front of a dust-covered shelf, as if revealing a long-forgotten treasure. "These are the texts that might interest you," the librarian said, pulling out a thick, dusty volume. The cover was made of worn leather, and Khalil felt a chill as he touched the book, as if he were touching history itself. "Here are accounts of the pyramids' construction and some theories about who might have erected them." Khalil sat at an ancient wooden table, where the scent of aged paper enveloped the room like a mist. Opening the book, his eyes met detailed illustrations of the pyramids, accompanied by descriptions that spoke of powerful beings who, according to tradition, would have contributed to their construction. The accounts were interwoven with references to mythical and divine figures, mentioning the Nephilim as an integral part of that narrative. The ancient Egyptians believed that the gods, who might be equivalent to the Nephilim, assisted in the erection of the Great Pyramids. It was believed that these beings possessed abilities beyond human comprehension, capable of moving enormous stones with supernatural ease, Khalil murmured, absorbing every word. What he read seemed to corroborate his intuition. The Nephilim were not just legends, but might have been active agents in the history of civilization. As he turned the pages of the book, Khalil found a passage that spoke of a controversial theory asserting that the Nephilim were responsible for the construction of the pyramids of Giza. The stones, some weighing tons, were aligned with millimeter precision, something that defied the known techniques of the time. This idea provoked a new wave of questions in his mind. How could human beings have performed such a feat without the aid of advanced technology? What if the Nephilim, with their extraordinary abilities, were the key to understanding the mysteries of ancient engineering? Time seemed to flow differently as Khalil immersed himself in the reading. He felt increasingly confident, but also concerned about the reception his discoveries might receive within the archaeological community. The possibility that non-human beings had influenced the development of civilization was a radical idea, something that would likely be met with skepticism or even hostility. But at the same time, the passion for the truth pulsed in his veins. He knew that his discoveries could open new doors to understanding history. Upon closing the book, a bold idea began to form in his mind. He needed to explore more about the construction of the pyramids and the engineering behind them. The connection between the Nephilim and the pyramids could be a fertile field for his research, a starting point for unearthing truths that were buried under layers of misinformation and prejudice. Khalil decided that he should visit the pyramid sites, observe the structures up close, and talk to specialists who could offer new perspectives. He said goodbye to the librarian and, with a racing heart, left the library. The daylight illuminated the path ahead, and the sense of urgency drove him to act. Khalil headed toward the city's outskirts, where the pyramids of Giza stood majestically, like sentinels of a distant past, guarding secrets that cried out to be revealed. The road to the pyramids was bordered by lush vegetation, a vibrant nature that seemed to contrast with the monumental stone structures. As he approached, Khalil felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of excitement and reverence. He paused for a moment, observing the pyramids rising toward the sky, a masterpiece of ancient engineering. With every step he took, his mind was buzzing with questions and theories. How were they built? What techniques were used? And above all, what role might the Nephilim have played in this monumental process? These questions echoed in his mind as he approached the Great Pyramid of Khufu, with its perfect form and impressive magnitude. Khalil decided that he would need a guide to help him better understand the mysteries of the construction and its history. He remembered a colleague who had extensively studied pyramid engineering and could provide valuable insights. With that in mind, he took out his mobile phone and made a quick call, inviting his friend to a meeting that same afternoon. While awaiting his colleague's arrival, Khalil walked a little. Further away, climbing a nearby hill that offered a panoramic view of the pyramids. From above, he contemplated the magnitude of the structures, each telling a story of work, faith, and ambition. The sun began to set, staining the sky with vibrant shades of orange and purple, and at that moment, Khalil felt he was on the verge of a discovery that could change not only his destiny, but also humanity's understanding of its own history. He was ready to explore the connections between the Nephilim, their abilities, and the pyramids, a path that could lead to hidden truths that would challenge conventional narratives. This journey, he thought, was just beginning. Khalil arrived at the pyramid complex with a racing heart. a whirlwind of feelings enveloping him. The immense structures stood before him, shadows of a glorious past, and he couldn't help but feel insignificant before the magnitude of the work. With his backpack on and his notebook in hand, he took a deep breath, trying to absorb the energy of the place. The air was dense, charged with history and mystery, as if every grain of sand around him were whispering ancient secrets. He began his exploration at the Great Pyramid of Khufu, his mind buzzing with all the information he'd gathered. The stones that made up the structure were enormous, some weighing over 2 tons, and the precision with which they were aligned defied his understanding. Khalil approached one of the faces of the pyramid, where the joints between the stones were almost imperceptible. He ran his hand over the rough surface, noticing a smoothness that seemed to contradict the age of the stone. How is this possible? He thought, questioning the conventional logic he had always accepted. With an angle meter and a measuring tape, Khalil began to meticulously record the measurements. The complex system of angles and alignments intrigued him. He noted that some edges were precisely aligned in relation to cardinal points, a fact that couldn't be explained solely by the skill of the ancient Egyptians. The theories he knew about construction techniques seemed increasingly inadequate. What if there really were beings with superhuman abilities behind all this? His mind began to draw a connection he couldn't ignore. Walking around the pyramid, Khalil noticed a group of tourists clustered in a corner listening to a guide. Curiosity made him approach, and he couldn't help the frustration he felt upon hearing the simplistic explanations about the construction of the pyramids. Hard work, ingenuity, and the strength of thousands of men, the guide was saying. Khalil shook his head, knowing there was much more behind that narrative. He was certain that the true stories were buried in the sands of time, waiting to be discovered. After observing for a while, he decided to move away and focus on his measurements. Every new measurement seemed to reinforce his theory that there was something more, something that didn't fit the traditional explanations. Khalil paused, looking at the sky and feeling the hot desert breeze. The idea that the Nephilim, beings from another dimension or an advanced civilization, might have contributed to the construction of the pyramids was both a revelation and a provocation. He found himself torn between his academic training and the new perspective that was beginning to emerge. The afternoon was advancing, and the sunlight began to decline, casting long, dramatic shadows over the pyramids. Khalil decided it was time to raise some bolder questions. He remembered an old friend, a civil engineer who had proven quite open to discussions about unconventional theories. Perhaps this is the moment to contact him, he thought as he noted some of the most intriguing measurements in his notebook. The feeling that his research was delving into uncharted waters was electrifying. As he walked, Khalil found a small, less visited corner of the complex. Approaching, he saw a series of almost imperceptible marks sculpted into the stones. Curious, he knelt down to examine them more closely. The marks seemed to represent a type of ancient writing, something he didn't immediately recognize. A wave of excitement ran through his body. It could be an indication that the Nephilim or other beings influenced not only the construction, but also the culture surrounding the pyramids. Khalil began to document the marks, sketching them in his notebook and recording his impressions. This could be the missing link, he thought, feeling a growing connection between the Nephilim and the Egyptians. The accounts he had read in the library resonated in his mind, and he began to draw a parallel between the ancient Egyptian beliefs about the gods and the stories of the Nephilim he had encountered. The daylight was beginning to fade, and Khalil felt he needed to return to the city. However, the feeling that he was on the verge of a monumental discovery prevented him from leaving. He decided he would spend a few more hours there, absorbing the atmosphere. The pyramid seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't describe, an invitation to explore the mysteries it held more deeply. With the sunlight almost gone, he moved away from the pyramids and sat on a nearby rock. In his mind, the idea was already forming that his research might not only be about the Nephilim, but about the very essence of humanity and its origins. The questions about who we truly were and where we came from became more urgent and relevant than ever. Khalil looked at the pyramids one last time before standing up. He knew the answer he was seeking was closer than ever. The connection between ancient technology and the Nephilim was a path he was determined to follow, a path that promised to reveal the deepest secrets of human history. With his heart pounding with anxiety and expectation, he headed toward the exit, determined to deepen this new research that could, finally, challenge everything he thought he knew. Khalil moved away from the sculpted marks and, in a moment of clarity, realized that his research was beginning to take on a new dimension. With his mind buzzing with possibilities, he decided to explore the complex further, determined to discover any clue that might support his theory. As he walked, His gaze lingered on a small structure in the shadow of one of the pyramids. It was a structure that had been little mentioned in the more common accounts of the place, but which, to him, seemed to emanate a peculiar energy. Approaching, he noticed that the entrance was partially covered by a layer of sand, as if time were trying to hide a secret. Khalil knelt and began to dig with his hands, carefully removing the layers of sand. As he uncovered the entrance, his heart quickened again. The possibility of finding something unexplored filled him with an almost childlike excitement. Upon entering, the space was small and dark, but Khalil had a flashlight in his backpack and quickly turned it on, illuminating walls that seemed to have been worked with meticulous care. The walls were adorned with hieroglyphs and images that seemed to tell a story. Khalil approached and began to decipher some of the symbols. Here, a representation of beings descending from the sky, and there, a figure that seems to be transmitting knowledge, he noted in his notebook, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. It was evident that the artisans who created those images possessed deep knowledge about subjects that surpassed the common understanding of the time. The idea that these beings could be the Nephilim, or at least a representation of them, began to take shape in his mind. Delving deeper, Khalil found an object buried in the stone floor. It was a tool, but not just any tool. Its surface was polished and its edges incredibly precise. He picked it up, examining every detail. The tool seemed to have been made of a metal that wasn't present in the time of the ancient Egyptians, something beyond the known bronze or iron. How is this possible, he thought, his mind reeling with the implication that an extremely advanced civilization might have existed. Khalil began to document the tool in his notebook, drawing it with precision and noting the dimensions. He realized that if this tool truly belonged to the ancients, it meant that their engineering and construction knowledge was much more advanced than traditional history claimed. What else might be found in the sands around them? This discovery sparked an ardent desire to go deeper. He needed concrete proof, more artifacts to support his new theory. Determined, Khalil left the small structure and returned to the Great Pyramid, where the sun was beginning to set. The golden light reflected off the stones, creating a visual spectacle that seemed to reinforce the connection between the past and the present. He sat on a rock, looking at the pyramid, trying to organize his thoughts. The idea of the Nephilim, beings who might have helped build these wonders, was no longer a distant theory. It was now a concrete possibility. With night approaching, Khalil took out his phone and decided to call his engineer friend. Maybe he can help me better understand what I found, he thought. The call was quickly answered. Khalil, good to hear your voice. What did you discover? His friend's tone was enthusiastic, and that encouraged Khalil to share his discoveries. He described the tool he had found and the marks on the stones, noting his friend's growing curiosity. You might be onto something big. If tools that shouldn't exist in that era really do exist, it would change everything we know about the construction of the pyramids, the engineer replied. I'd like to see that evidence. Could you send me photos? Khalil agreed, and the conversation soon evolved into a technical discussion about ancient engineering, with his friend suggesting methods to investigate the composition of the tool's metal. After ending the call, Khalil felt his determination had intensified. Now, he wasn't just searching for answers for himself, he was on a mission that could alter the world's view of history. Determined to leave no stone unturned, he began to plan his next actions. What else could be unearthed? What other truths could be revealed about the Nephilim and their possible connection to the pyramids? As he walked toward the complex exit, night fully settled in, and the stars began to shine intensely in the sky. Khalil looked up, feeling small, but at the same time, part of something bigger. He was determined to move forward, to challenge established narratives, and to seek the truth hidden in the shadows of time. What awaited him on his journey? The questions only accumulated, increasing the need for answers. Khalil left the complex, his spirits high and his mind full of ideas. The search for more evidence about the Nephilim and their influence on ancient Egyptian civilization was just beginning. He said goodbye to the Great Pyramid with a renewed feeling, knowing that every step taken would bring him closer to the truth, and with every revelation, traditional history would become more fragile, allowing new narratives to emerge from the sands of time. Khalil ended the call with his engineer friend, adrenaline pulsing in his veins. He knew he was on the verge of something monumental. The discovery of the tool and the enigmatic marks had led him to a place that defied the conventional understanding of history. With a racing heart, he decided it was time to seek deeper answers about the Nephilim beyond physical structures. He remembered the Book of Enoch, a text that many considered apocryphal, but which his research insisted on bringing to light. If the Nephilim truly existed, the Book of Enoch may contain fundamental information about them, he thought, as he walked back to his tent. Night had fallen, and the starlight illuminated the desert like a cloak of secrets. With the flashlight in hand, he began to search through his notes, looking for references to the text that could be the key to his research. After a few minutes of searching, he found what he was looking for, a small notebook where he had recorded notes during his readings at the library. As his eyes scanned the pages, the words began to come alive in his mind. The Book of Enoch spoke about the fall of the angels, known as the Watchers, who descended to earth, and took human wives, generating the Nephilim, giants who brought chaos and corruption to the world. Khalil felt a shiver run down his spine. The gravity of what he was reading was immense. The idea that celestial beings in search of knowledge and power had interacted with humanity sparked a combination of fascination and fear. The actions of the Watchers weren't just a mistake. They were an act of rebellion against the divine order, he murmured to himself, as he lost himself in the implications of the words. The Book of Enoch highlighted that this transgression resulted in a flood, a divine cleansing aimed at restoring balance. Khalil understood that this narrative resonated with the history he knew, but now it took on a new dimension in light of what he had discovered at the pyramids. He sat in his tent, surrounded by maps and notes, and began to write frantically. The Nephilim were not just mythological figures, they were a representation of a real event, an intersection between the divine and the human that resulted in their own destruction. He connected his thoughts with what he had learned at the excavations. The monumental constructions, full of mysteries, could be the legacy of a civilization that had interacted directly with these beings. As he wrote, the emotional connection to the narrative enveloped him. Khalil felt the weight of the consequences of the Nephilim's presence. The story was not just about giants and gods, it was about the decisions that shaped humanity. He recalled the engineer's words, "If tools that shouldn't exist in that era really do exist, it would change everything we know about the construction of the pyramids." That phrase reverberated in his mind. What if that tool was a symbol of the Nephilim's wisdom, an echo of lost knowledge that might have been passed on to humans? With his mind buzzing, he decided he needed to research the theological implications of the Nephilim's fall more deeply. What did the possibility that a superior power had directly interfered in human evolution mean for humanity? What did religious traditions say about those who had challenged divine orders? These thoughts were like a labyrinth, each answer leading to new questions. Khalil closed his eyes for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. The darkness of the tent was a safe haven, but at the same time, he knew he needed to return to the pyramid complex. What more could he discover? Each new step led him deeper into unknown territory, where the answers were not clear, but the questions were abundant. The idea that the Nephilim might have contributed to the construction of the pyramids now seemed more than just speculation. It was a tangible possibility. He was about to become part of a larger conversation, one that spanned millennia and crossed the boundaries of time and space. With a new plan in mind, Khalil decided that the next day he would return to the site of the small structure he had found. He needed to deepen his research and search for more clues that could link the Nephilim to the most impressive monuments in human history. At dawn, Khalil woke up with a renewed determination. The sun was rising on the horizon, coloring the sky with shades of orange and pink, a beautiful promise of a new day. He quickly packed his things, eager to explore more before the daylight ran out. The walls of the small structure held secrets that could change everything he knew about the past and humanities. Connection with the beings who descended from the sky. As he walked toward the structure, Khalil reflected on what he had read in the Book of Enoch. The story of the Watchers and their fall was not just a warning, but a lesson about ambition and the consequences it brings. He wondered if humanity was doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Every step brought him closer not only to an archaeological discovery, but also to a spiritual revelation that could redefine the collective understanding of who we are and where we came from. Upon reaching the entrance of the structure, Khalil felt a wave of emotion. With the flashlight in hand, he prepared to enter again, determined to seek the truths hidden in the shadows. What more could be revealed? What other secrets were waiting to be discovered? The journey was just beginning, and the call of the Nephilim resonated in his heart, promising answers that could change the course of history. Khalil immersed himself deeper into the notes, his heart pounding with the intensity of his search. The words of the Book of Enoch resonated in his mind, creating a mosaic of images. The Nephilim were described as beings of colossal stature, with abilities that transcended human understanding. Beings who were part divine, part human, he thought, as various passages from the text began to intertwine in his mind. He believed that these hybrids possessed a supernatural strength, capable of shaping and altering the world around them. He began to make notes about the physical characteristics of the Nephilim. Immeasurable height, enormous strength. They were not just physical giants, but also possessed a superior intelligence, he wrote. This combination of attributes made them not only fearsome, but also fascinating. The idea that beings with such power might have walked among humans left Khalil uneasy. He wondered how these interactions would shape history, not only in biblical stories, but also in the traditions of other cultures. With his mind buzzing, he remembered other civilizations that mentioned similar beings. Sumerian myths spoke of grandiose figures, and the accounts of Norse mythology also featured giants who challenged the gods. The connection between these narratives and the story of the Nephilim seemed more than coincidental. If other peoples also reported encounters with beings of great stature and power, what does that say about our understanding of the past? He questioned. The idea that humanity had always dealt with these entities, but relegated them to the realm of myth, began to occupy his thoughts. Khalil decided he needed more evidence to support his theories. He rose from his improvised table and, still holding the flashlight, left the tent, determined to explore the ruins once more. The fresh night air encouraged him, and the starlight seemed to guide him on his journey. He walked toward the pyramids, where shadows danced around the majestic structures. The vastness of the desert stretched out before him like an ocean of mystery. As he approached, Khalil noted a new direction to follow. He remembered a passage from the Book of Enoch that mentioned a mountain that was a meeting point for the Watchers. Mount Hermon, a famous mountain, was a considerable distance away, but the connection was strong. If the Watchers really descended there, what could be nearby? He reflected, his mind spinning with possibilities. The idea of an expedition to Mount Hermon began to take shape in his mind. As he walked, a gentle breeze caressed his face, bringing with it a whisper, as if the desert itself were trying to tell him a secret. Khalil remembered that one of the pillars of the Nephilim story was their origin. He couldn't ignore the importance of understanding where they came from and how they were connected to humanity. These beings weren't just isolated figures in time, they were part of a legacy that still resonated in today's society, he thought. At that moment, he decided he needed to gather more information about the mythology of other cultures. The search for data on the relationship between the Nephilim and similar figures and myths from various civilizations would become his new mission. However, he couldn't do this alone. Khalil needed to assemble a team, people who shared his passion for the truth and could help him investigate further. The idea of forming a research group began to take shape in his mind. Back in his tent, he started making a list of potential collaborators. Scholars, archaeologists, linguists, and even mythologists could provide valuable insights. He noted down names, places, and specializations. Every name he wrote seemed to bring him a little closer to the goal. The research was becoming a web, and he was at its center, pulling the threads of knowledge. Khalil felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just gathering information, he was building a bridge between history and truth. The idea that the Nephilim might have influenced the trajectory of humanity filled him with a mixture of enthusiasm and responsibility. Every new discovery could not only change the understanding of history, but also impact the view people had of themselves. As he worked, the image of the Nephilim became more vivid in his mind. They were not just monsters or gods. They were living tragedies, beings who had challenged the laws of the universe and ultimately paid a price for it. If they were indeed hybrids between humans and gods, what does that mean for us, the descendants of those who remained? He questioned, reflecting on the continuity of human history. Khalil knew that the answers he sought were beyond what had been written. The ruins around him were not just stones, they were witnesses to a past that cried out to be understood. He felt he was on the verge of a revelation, a truth that could change everything. With his eyes fixed on the pyramids, he understood that his journey was just beginning. The next step would lead him to more questions and, hopefully, to answers that could connect the past to the present in a way he never imagined. The night continued to advance, and with every passing minute, Khalil prepared himself for what was to come. The knowledge about the Nephilim and their theological implications began to transform into a more meaningful quest. He was determined to uncover the truth that had been hidden under the sands of time, and his mission became increasingly clear: to rescue the Nephilim, narrative, and give life to a story that could finally be told. Khalil entered the tent again, determined to gather more information that would help him in his mission. He had begun to realize that the story of the Nephilim was not confined solely to the Middle East. Reviewing his notes and references, he noticed that accounts of giant and powerful beings existed in various cultures around the world. He wanted to understand how these narratives intertwined and what that meant for his research. With a new fervor, he took his laptop and began to research similar myths. The first culture that caught his attention was the Mesopotamian. The accounts of the Anunnaki, gods who descended to Earth and interacted with humanity, were intriguing. Khalil remembered a passage he had read earlier. The Anunnaki came from the heavens and brought with them knowledge, but also discord. The idea of gods, who not only shaped the destiny of men, but could also be seen as a version of the Nephilim, left him thoughtful. He wrote everything down in his notebook. The Anunnaki resemble the Nephilim. Both are described as beings with extraordinary abilities, capable of influencing civilizations, he wrote, his mind working at high speed. Khalil wondered if the origin of these beings could be part of a larger cycle, a narrative that crossed borders and repeated itself throughout human history. While reviewing his notes, he remembered Native American traditions. Many of these cultures had legends of giants who inhabited the earth before humans. The accounts of the giants of yore, who supposedly fought against the gods and were defeated, surfaced in his mind. These stories bear an impressive resemblance to what we know about the Nephilim, he reflected. Khalil decided he needed to study more about these cultures and understand how their narratives might be connected. Driven by curiosity, he began to make a list of cultures that mentioned similar beings. In addition to Mesopotamia and indigenous traditions, he remembered the Norse legends about the Jotun, the giants who challenged the gods and inhabited the mountains. The presence of giants in different mythologies cannot be mere coincidence, he thought. Khalil was increasingly convinced that there was a common origin for these narratives. As the night advanced, he felt the urgency to share his discoveries. The idea of forming a research team began to materialize more clearly in his mind. Khalil knew that, to deepen his investigations, he would need collaborators who shared his passion for the truth. He needed archaeologists who knew excavation techniques, linguists who could decipher ancient texts, and mythologists who would bring a critical perspective to the stories he was beginning to connect. Khalil made a list of people he knew. Among them were his former professors, college colleagues, and even some contacts he had made at conferences. I'm going to need specialists who can help me approach this. Research in a multidisciplinary way, he thought as he wrote the names and areas of specialization. Every name that appeared on his list generated a feeling of hope. He envisioned the team gathered around a table, all sharing their ideas and discoveries, uniting knowledge to form a broader vision of the Nephilim. He was determined to contact each of them the next morning. But before sleeping, he wanted to reflect on his discoveries. The connection he had made between cultures, stories, and the Nephilim was powerful. The narratives were not just scattered fragments of a distant past, they were echoes of a universal truth that humanity had shared. If the Nephilim were a real phenomenon, then the cultures that mentioned them might be trying to tell us something about our own history, he told himself. Khalil sat in his tent, the notebook on his lap, and began to write an outline of what his research proposal would be. He outlined the main points he wanted to address: the presence of giants in different cultures, the comparisons between the legends and their implications, and the need for a team that could explore these ideas in depth. Every word he wrote seemed to bring him a little closer to the truth he sought. The night was quiet, and the stars shone intensely in the sky. Khalil felt inspired, as if the constellations themselves were guiding his path. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, allowing the peace of the night to envelop him. The connection he felt with history, with cultures, and with the Nephilim was palpable. He knew he was about to embark on an incredible journey, one that could change not only his life, but also the way humanity understood its own past. As he drifted off to sleep, his mind continued to work. He formulated a theory in his head. What if the story of the Nephilim and their counterparts in other cultures were a form of collective memory, a recollection of an era when powerful beings walked among men? That idea left him uneasy and excited at the same time, and he knew that, regardless of what he found, the search for truth would be his mission from that moment on. Khalil woke up the next morning with a renewed sense of determination. He knew he needed to prepare for the upcoming conference, where he would present his discoveries about the Nephilim and the connections between cultures from different parts of the world. The idea of sharing his perspective motivated him, but also made him nervous. He knew that academic community could be severe in its judgment. After a quick coffee, he sat at his desk, surrounded by notes, books, and article printouts. The place was immersed in a deep silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of turning pages. Khalil reviewed his presentation, reflecting on every point he intended to discuss. He wanted not only to present his ideas, but also to convince others that the narratives about the Nephilim were relevant and worthy of research. However, as he reviewed his slides, a cloud of doubt began to hang over his mind. He recalled the criticisms he had faced at other conferences when his theories were met with skepticism and disdain. What if they don't take it seriously? What if I'm just deluding myself? He thought, his determination wavering in the face of these uncertainties. But then, he remembered the passion that guided him. The research wasn't just about the Nephilim, but about understanding humanity on a deeper level, a search for truths that might have been forgotten. Khalil decided he would not let fear paralyze him. He stood up, took a deep breath, and repeated to himself, "These stories need to be told." With a new focus, he dedicated himself to rehearsing his presentation. With every repetition, his confidence grew. He imagined the audience, the room full of academics and students, and visualized their reaction to his exposition. What he had to say was important, and he was ready to defend it. On the day of the conference, Khalil arrived early at the auditorium. The space was wide, with chairs arranged in a semicircle and a raised stage at the back. He sat down, trying to absorb the atmosphere as he watched people enter. Low conversations and laughter filled the air, but Khalil felt a little out of place. It was a familiar world, but at the same time, frightening. He knew his ideas were unconventional, and that could trigger adverse reactions. When it was his turn to speak, Khalil went up to the stage and looked at the audience. The faces were a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and indifference. He began his presentation with an introduction about the Nephilim, highlighting the various cultures that mentioned similar beings. As he spoke, he noticed some reactions in the audience. Some people were attentive, others seemed to roll their eyes. Khalil presented his discoveries about the Anunnaki and the giants of yore, attempting to draw a parallel that showed how these narratives were connected. He used impactful images of artifacts and archaeological sites to reinforce his points. It's not just about believing in giants or divine beings, he said, but about what these stories represent for our understanding of human history and the interactions between civilizations. However, during the Q&A, the first criticisms began to emerge. A professor known for his conservative views stood up. Khalil, do you really believe that these legends of giants have any historical basis? These stories are clearly mythological, with no concrete evidence to support them, he said with a dismissive tone. Khalil's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. I understand your skepticism, but my research is based on a comparative analysis of cultures around the world. What I am proposing is that these stories may have roots in real events or in interpretations of profound human experiences, he replied, his voice firmer than he felt. Other academics followed suit, questioning the validity of the sources Khalil had presented and suggesting he was merely playing with coincidences. Feeling the pressure increase, he took a deep breath and remembered what he had learned from his mentors. Resilience is fundamental in research. I understand this may seem controversial, but science advances when we are willing to challenge our own beliefs, he stated in a more assertive tone. To his surprise, some members of the audience began to nod, showing support. Khalil realized that even in the face of skepticism, there was an openness to dialogue. He seized this to reinforce his position, presenting more evidence and asking questions that encouraged reflection. If we don't explore these connections, how can we truly understand what humanity went through? He questioned, his gaze sweeping the audience. The conference ended, and Khalil left the stage with a racing heart. Although he had faced criticism, he felt stronger and more determined. The skepticism he encountered didn't discourage him. On the contrary, it solidified his conviction. I need to meet with those who share this vision, he thought, remembering the list of contacts he had made. As he walked through the auditorium corridors, he began to receive messages of support from colleagues who were intrigued by his ideas. Many approached, asking questions and expressing interest in collaborating. Khalil smiled, understanding that despite the initial resistance, there was a group willing to explore these narratives with him. The journey is just beginning, he reflected as he looked at the horizon upon leaving the building. He knew he needed more evidence and support, but now, more than ever, he felt he was on the right path. The mystery of the Nephilim continued to call him, and he was determined to discover the truth hidden in the shadows of history. Khalil took a deep breath, trying to ignore the anxiety pulsing in his chest. After presenting his ideas, he realized he wasn't alone in his quest to understand the Nephilim. During the conference break, he had the opportunity to converse with other researchers, who also shared an interest in the stories of giant beings and the connection between cultures. It was as if an invisible thread united them, a web of curiosity that extended across different disciplines and specialties. One of the academics who approached him was an ethnologist named Amir. He had studied the oral traditions of various indigenous cultures and was particularly interested in the relationship between the Nephilim and the mythological beings that appeared in the stories of his own ancestry. Khalil and Amir discussed fervently, and Khalil felt his confidence grow as they exchanged ideas. The stories of giants are not just myths, Amir said. They reflect the fears and realities of societies that faced calamities. The flood, for example, may be a metaphor for catastrophic events that shaped human history. This conversation sparked a new flame of inspiration in Khalil. He realized that together they could begin to build a collaborative investigation that connected their discoveries. The idea of joining forces with other scholars, seeking the truth behind the legends, seemed a logical and necessary step. We need a group, Khalil proposed, a network of researchers who share data and theories. If we can present a united front, it might be harder to ignore our discoveries. Amir smiled, visibly excited by the proposal. I already know. Some people who would be interested. We can create a discussion group, perhaps even organize an expedition. I imagine there are many places around the world that could offer clues about these forgotten beings. With the idea planted in their minds, Khalil and Amir discussed plans on how to gather other researchers. Time flew by and soon the break came to an end. Khalil returned to the auditorium with a new perspective, hope pulsing in his heart. He was determined not only to present his ideas, but also to inspire a collaboration that could change the way research on the Nephilim was conducted. In the days that followed, Khalil busied himself connecting with other researchers, sending emails and scheduling meetings. He was surprised to discover that there was a growing number of academics interested in the intersections between myths, archaeology, and the history of the Nephilim. An anthropology professor, a historian specializing in mythology, and even an artist who studied visual representations of mythological beings joined his cause. Together, they began to compile a vast range of evidence. Khalil was amazed to discover how the stories about giants were not exclusive to a single culture. "Look at this," he said in one of the meetings, pointing to a map he had created. "Here are the mentions of beings similar to Nephilim, from Mesopotamia to South America, passing through Europe and Asia. There's a pattern that cannot be ignored." As they reviewed ancient texts and archaeological records, they were able to connect historical events, such as natural disasters and climate changes, to accounts of giants that emerged during periods of crisis. The discussions became more fervent as each member of the group brought their own perspectives and experiences. The collaborative research began to transform into a truly multidisciplinary investigation that transcended geographical and temporal boundaries. Khalil felt increasingly like a leader within the group, welcoming everyone's ideas with respect and admiring the diversity of thought. His confidence in his own theories grew as he saw his ideas validated by others. One night, while working together on an ancient manuscript, he had an epiphany. What if the flood wasn't just a natural catastrophe? What if it was an orchestrated event, a response to something much greater? Something linked to the Nephilim? The room fell silent for a moment, and then Amir spoke, his voice low. "If that's true, then we need to investigate further. We need an expedition to explore the sites mentioned in the ancient texts and see what we can find. The connection between the Nephilim and the flood may be the key we are looking for." The excitement in the group grew, and in a short time they began to plan the expedition. The goal was not only to search for physical evidence, but also to understand the narratives that linked the Nephilim to significant events in human history. Khalil felt reinvigorated, as if every step they were taking brought them closer to a truth that could change the perception of the past. Thus, with the new team formed and an expedition in planning, Khalil looked out the window of his office at the starry sky. He knew that the questions arising in his mind wouldn't have easy answers, but he was determined to seek them. How can we truly understand what humanity went through, he thought. That quest was more than just simple research. It was a journey toward understanding who we were and where we came from, linking the past to the present. And so Khalil made the decision to continue his search, not only for the Nephilim, but for the essence of human history, which was entangled in legends, myths, and forgotten truths. He knew that the expedition could be the next major step, not only for him, but for all those who sought to understand the depths of the human experience. The future was uncertain, but the determination he now carried was clear and unshakable. Khalil was nervous, but a spark of determination burned within him. He had assembled a group of specialists from different areas, and now they were just a few steps away from an expedition that could change the course of their research. Mount Hermon, with its rich tapestry of legends and myths, seemed to promise long-sought answers. The expectation was in the air, palpable, like electricity before a storm. On the morning of their departure, the group gathered at a meeting point, each carrying not only equipment but also a contagious optimism. Among them was Amir, who had become a constant and encouraging presence. "We are about to enter a territory where the echoes of the past can still be heard," he said, gesturing enthusiastically. "The stories of the Nephilim are intertwined with this place. It's time to bring these narratives to life." Khalil nodded, feeling the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He was not just an archaeologist. He was a leader, someone who could guide his team in search of the truth. During the trip, he made sure to listen to every member of the group, encouraging the exchange of ideas. The diversity of thoughts was a richness he didn't want to underestimate. Upon arriving at Mount Hermon, the magnitude of the place enveloped them. The majestic mountains seemed to whisper secrets through the wind, each stone carrying stories that defied perception. Khalil looked at the others, his heart beating fast. "We are here to discover more than artifacts. We are here to understand what these beings represent for humanity." The group began exploring, dividing into small teams. Khalil and Amir met with the historian who had joined them, a woman named Layla who specialized in comparative mythology. "We need to focus on the legends surrounding this place," she suggested. "Mount Hermon is not just a mountain, it is a symbol of transgression and connection between worlds." As they walked, Khalil remembered the words Amir had shared. The stories of giants are not just myths. He began to wonder how the legends of the Nephilim might be connected to other traditions worldwide. Perhaps the Nephilim are not just isolated figures, but parts of a global puzzle that connects cultures throughout history, he pondered. Throughout the day, the group found several rock inscriptions, some almost erased by time. Khalil felt electrified. One, particularly intriguing, showed figures resembling giant beings, accompanied by symbols that looked like an unknown alphabet. "These marks could be the key," he said, pointing. "They suggest a communication, a record of encounters between humans and these entities that may have been the Nephilim." Layla frowned, analyzing the symbols. "If we can decipher this, we can establish a connection between historical accounts and our theories about the Nephilim. This could be monumental." The team's enthusiasm grew as each new discovery emerged. Khalil realized that his confidence increased with every step. He began to lead discussions, proposing theories and encouraging others to contribute. The atmosphere was filled with camaraderie, and they were more than a group of researchers. They were a team committed to unveiling long-buried truths. As night approached, the group set up camp in a clearing, surrounded by tall trees and the distant echo of a waterfall. The stars shone intensely in the sky, and the conversation around the campfire took on a contemplative tone. "The story of the Nephilim is a journey in search of understanding," Amir said, looking into the fire. "It's not just about discovering what happened in the past, but about understanding what this means for us today." Khalil reflected on that. He had entered this expedition seeking answers, but now he realized that the search was also about human connection. "We are all here because we believe that stories shape our identity," he replied. "They remind us who we are and where we came from." The conversation flowed, and soon new ideas emerged about the legends associated with Mount Hermon and how they might relate to other narratives around the world. The excitement was palpable, and Khalil knew they were on the right track. The next morning they continued their exploration, now more focused and determined. Khalil led the group toward an area that seemed to have been a place of worship. The stones were arranged in a way that indicated a ritualistic purpose. There they found more evidence, ceramic fragments with drawings representing scenes of offerings made to beings that resembled giants. "This is extraordinary," exclaimed Layla, holding a fragment. "These representations can give us insights into how the ancients viewed the Nephilim. They were not just feared, they were revered." Khalil felt a wave of emotion as he realized that every discovery brought them closer to the truth they sought. He looked at his colleagues, now more than just researchers. They were partners on a journey in search of a deeper understanding. "We are changing the narrative," he said, with renewed confidence. "The stories we are gathering here are more than accounts of the past. They are an invitation to reimagine our human history and the forces that shaped us." As the day progressed, the team felt energized. The discoveries they were making challenged not only traditional narratives, but also the very essence of what it meant to be human. Khalil was determined to move forward, not only in search of answers, but also in building a new story that could unite the voices of the past and the present. With every step, he felt that the mystery of the Nephilim was beginning to unfold, and the truth they sought could finally be revealed. They were part of something greater, a timeline that spanned millennia, and the journey was just beginning. The campfire crackled softly, and the smell of burning wood mixed with the coolness of the night. Khalil watched his companions, each lost in their thoughts as the stars shone brightly above them. What might have been just an ordinary expedition was now transforming into something much greater. The inscriptions they discovered during the day were beginning to shape a narrative that could challenge everything they thought they knew about human history. "These inscriptions may be more than just records of encounters," said Layla, breaking the silence as she stirred the embers with a piece of wood. "They may represent a pact, an alliance between angels and humans." Her statement made everyone look at her, and the tension in the air intensified. Khalil felt a wave of excitement mixed with a pang of fear. What did that mean for them? What if the legends about the Nephilim were, in fact, more than mere myths? "Are you saying that the Nephilim were part of a pact? How does this relate to what we found?" Amir asked, his voice a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Khalil realized that the conversation was taking an unexpected turn, but that was exactly what he had hoped for. "If the stories of giants and celestial beings are not just isolated narratives, but part of a global puzzle, then we need to explore this further," he replied, passion pulsing in his words. The discussions deepened, each member sharing their ideas and theories. Khalil noticed that the team was becoming increasingly united, recognizing the importance of their discoveries. The sense of camaraderie was evident. They were together on a mission that transcended mere academic pursuit. It was a spiritual and intellectual journey. We are here to understand who we are and where we came from. The answers are in the stories we have ignored for so long, Khalil said, looking each of them in the eye. That night, as the fire illuminated their faces, Layla shared her reflections on the narrative of the fallen angels. The ancient texts speak of a fall, not just physical, but spiritual. The Nephilim can be seen as the consequence of that transgression. They were not just giants. They were the representation of something greater that failed to maintain harmony between the celestial and terrestrial worlds. The profundity of her words reverberated in the group's heart. Khalil felt they were touching something deep, an invisible thread that linked legends to a forgotten truth. The conversation flowed to accounts from other cultures. Amir mentioned stories of giant beings that appeared in mythologies of various civilizations, from Mesopotamia to the east. It's impressive how these narratives intertwine, creating a tapestry of human experiences that extends throughout history, he observed. Khalil agreed, feeling that the Nephilim narrative was not just an isolated event, but part of a global phenomenon that reflected the human struggle with the unknown and the sacred. As the night progressed, the team decided that the next day they would explore the inscriptions more thoroughly, looking for any evidence that could confirm these theories. The idea that the Nephilim might have been part of a pact with humans was intriguing, but also terrifying. What did that mean for the understanding of human morality, ethics, and even spirituality? If the Nephilim were so powerful, and at the same time flawed, what does that say about us? Where is the limit between what we can achieve and what we should not pursue? Khalil asked, contemplating the depth of the question. Everyone fell silent, reflecting on the magnitude of the responsibility they carried. They were not just seeking answers. They were confronting the very essence of the human condition. With the sunrise, the group prepared for another day of exploration. Khalil woke up with the soft light filtering through the trees, a new day full of promises and uncertainties. He felt they were on the verge of a discovery that could not only rewrite history, but also challenge humanity's fundamental beliefs. The questions floating in his mind were like shadows in the morning light. Were the Nephilim the messengers of knowledge that should remain hidden, or were they mere illusions created by fear and the need to understand the unknown? In the end, the true threat is not the Nephilim themselves, but what their stories reveal about us, he murmured to himself as he watched his companions prepare for the journey. Determination was visible on their faces, and Khalil felt strengthened by the collective energy. The team was united, and everyone was ready to face whatever Mount Hermon still had to. Reveal. As they walked toward the inscriptions, Khalil knew that with every step they were closer to understanding the true nature of the Nephilim, as well as the impact of their existence throughout history. The stories of giants, of pacts, and of falls were more than mere legends. They were echoes resonating in the minds and hearts of humanity. A constant reminder that the quest for knowledge and understanding is a journey that never ends. As they approached the engraved rocks, the atmosphere became charged with expectation. The inscriptions were waiting, silent, ready to tell their story. Khalil felt they were about to discover not only the secrets of the past, but also the challenges that humanity would need to face in the future. The truth, he realized, could be both a blessing and a curse, and the choice of how to deal with that knowledge was entirely theirs. The night unfolded like a starry mantle, and the mood of anticipation hovered in the air like an electric foreboding. Khalil felt the pulsating energy around the campfire, and with every word exchanged among his companions, the Nephilim narrative gained new life, as if the echoes of a distant past were beginning to manifest in the present. He knew that the search for answers was more than a mere academic exercise. It was a journey that connected them deeply to their own identities and to the essence of humanity. The next day, the sun rose on the horizon, scattering its golden light over Mount Hermon. The group prepared for the day's exploration with a renewed sense of purpose. Khalil, reinvigorated by the previous night's conversation, led the team toward a less explored part of the mountain, where they believed new inscriptions might be hidden. The atmosphere was charged with possibilities, and every step they took felt as if they were approaching something monumental. As they walked, Khalil couldn't help but reflect on the depth of the discussion they had. The ideas about the pact between angels and humans resonated in his mind. If the Nephilim were, in fact, a result of that transgression, what would that imply for us today, he thought. The intersection between the sacred and the profane seemed more relevant than ever, and his curiosity about their own origins intensified. "Look!" Amir exclaimed, interrupting Khalil's thoughts. He pointed to a rock overhang, where a series of ancient symbols were engraved with impressive precision. Khalil approached, feeling his heart race. The inscriptions were similar to those they had found previously, but this time the shapes resembled human beings and fantastic creatures, almost as if they were portraying a scene from a myth in action. "We may be facing a visual representation of a historical event," Layla said, studying the figures. "These symbols may illustrate the pact we mentioned. They're not just words, they're images of a profound understanding between two worlds." The team dispersed in different directions, each trying to decipher the story that those stones might tell. Throughout the day, the excitement grew as more inscriptions were discovered. With every new revelation, Khalil felt his conviction grow stronger. They were, in fact, facing a global phenomenon, an account that spanned cultures and eras. Social media was starting to buzz with their findings, and media coverage increased as their discoveries became more widely known. The attention they received was both a blessing and a curse. Expectations were high, and the pressure was mounting. Khalil found himself facing a dilemma. If his discoveries were truly significant, how could he share this information with the world responsibly? The idea of presenting a theory about the Nephilim, supported by archaeological evidence, could challenge the status quo. What he had in mind was a revolution in the understanding of human history, an affirmation that could, in some way, re-establish the connection between past and present. As night fell again, the group gathered around the campfire. Khalil spoke, his voice charged with emotion. "We are on the verge of something that can change everything. Our discoveries are not just about the Nephilim. They speak about us, about our history, and about the truths we have ignored." He looked at the faces of his colleagues, perceiving that most of them shared that same passion, that same anxiety. "We need to prepare for the exposure. The world needs to understand what we found." The climate of camaraderie that had developed was stronger than ever. They discussed plans for the presentation, pondering the best ways to convey the information without distorting the truth. "We must be transparent about our theories," Amir suggested. "It's important for people to understand that we are exploring possibilities, not asserting absolute truths." Khalil agreed. "Exactly, and we must remember that behind the inscriptions and the theories, there are stories of people, of cultures that tried to understand their place in the world." The idea that each of the Nephilim represented a part of the human struggle for self-understanding was a powerful narrative that could resonate with many. The discussions extended late into the night, and the group's passion was evident in every word. Khalil was determined not only to share his discoveries, but also to invite the public to participate in this search for understanding. He envisioned an exhibition that was not just a presentation, but an interactive experience, where visitors could touch the wonders of the past and reflect on how these stories intertwined with their own lives. With the increased interest, the group decided that the exhibition would present not only the inscriptions, but also the stories that came from them. They wanted the public to feel the importance of the connections they were trying to unveil, to think about what it meant to be human in a constantly changing world. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly above, Khalil allowed himself to dream. He dreamed of a world where the stories of the Nephilim were no longer just forgotten legends, but an invitation to explore the complexity of the human condition, a bridge between the past and the present which could, in some way, illuminate the future. With that in mind, he felt prepared for the challenge that lay ahead. Their journey was far from over, and the responsibility they now carried was both a burden and an honor. Khalil knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but he was ready to face them. The world was about to hear the truth they had discovered, and nothing could stop them now. Khalil stood, observing the public's bustle in the exhibition hall. The atmosphere was charged with expectation and enthusiasm. After weeks of preparation, the big day had finally arrived. The auditorium, decorated with images of the inscriptions they discovered on Mount Hermon, was full of academics, journalists, and curious people, all eager to hear what he had to say about the Nephilim and their implications for human history. The presentation began with a powerful introduction, where Khalil highlighted the importance of the findings and the need to reevaluate the traditional narrative of history. His heart pounded as he prepared to reveal the new information that could change everything. Today, we are not just talking about ancient myths. We are talking about a forgotten truth that can redefine this sea understanding of our own origin, he declared, feeling the energy of the room pulse in response. The first part of his presentation focused on the inscriptions they had found and how they connected to accounts from various cultures around the world. Khalil showed projected images of the rock, highlighting the symbols that represented a connection between humans and beings from other dimensions. These symbols are not merely artifacts of a distant past. They are testimonies of an interaction that shaped our history, he explained, his voice resonating with authority. With every slide he showed, Khalil saw the expression of his listeners transform from skepticism to fascination. He addressed the narrative of the Book of Enoch, detailing the fall of the angels and the consequences of their pact with humans. The transgression was not a mere act of rebellion. It was a choice that altered the destiny of humanity. Just like the Nephilim, who walked among us, their actions reverberate to this day. Khalil noticed that the murmurs in the audience began to increase. He felt that what he was presenting was more than just a new theory. It was a call to action. We must question the truths that were imposed on us. What would it mean for our identity if the Nephilim truly existed? And what if they are still among us, in some way, influencing our reality? At the end of his presentation, he opened the floor for questions, and the room exploded with a series of inquiries. One of the most respected academics, a historian known for his skepticism, raised his hand. Khalil, don't you think this is a way of romanticizing the past? Wouldn't it be more prudent to treat this as part of mythology and not as a historical fact? Khalil smiled, recognizing the challenge. I understand your position, but what we are doing here is simply opening a dialogue. The evidence we found cannot be ignored. What we call a myth may very well be an ancient civilization's attempt to transmit truths that, for some reason, we prefer to forget. The conversation extended for hours, and the energy in the room was palpable. In the end, Khalil was surrounded by journalists and fellow researchers, many of whom were interested in collaborating on future research. The exhibition not only brought him recognition, but also began to form a network of people who shared the same search for answers. As night approached and the event came to an end, Khalil reflected on what had happened. He didn't just present his discoveries. He started a movement. The idea that the Nephilim were a part of human history was beginning to gain momentum, and with that, new opportunities for research and collaborations arose. At the exit of the auditorium, Khalil was approached by Layla, who was beaming with enthusiasm. Khalil, did you see their reaction? People are really connecting with your vision. This is just the beginning. He nodded, feeling more confident than ever. Yes, but now the responsibility is even greater. We have to ensure that this conversation continues. We need to investigate further, not only about the Nephilim, but about all the elements they represent. Layla smiled, her eyes shining with determination. And we are going to do that together. We have to go back to Mount Hermon, explore every corner. What we found may be just the tip of the iceberg. Their conversation began to attract the attention of others present, who joined the discussion, sharing their own theories and ideas. Khalil realized that with every new interaction, the community they were forming became stronger. It was as if Mount Hermon itself, with its mysteries and secrets, were alive, pushing them to explore more and more. As they walked toward the exit, Khalil felt a wave of hope. What was once a solitary academic project was now transforming into a collective mission. He understood that the search for the hidden truths about the Nephilim was not just a matter of history, but a quest for identity and purpose in the contemporary world. The night illuminated by the stars seemed to promise a future full of discoveries. Khalil knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to move forward. What they were about to do was more than just research. It was a step toward a deeper understanding of who we are and where we came from. In the days that followed, he and his team began to plan the next expedition. The idea of returning to Mount Hermon, where the story of the Nephilim began, was irresistible. With every new step, the journey became richer and more meaningful, and Khalil was ready to explore the mysteries that still remained in the shadows of history. Thus, the questions that once seemed impossible to answer began to unfold into new opportunities for research and dialogue. The stories of the Nephilim were just beginning to be told, and Khalil was determined to be the voice that would bring these truths to light. With this, the connection between past and present became increasingly clear, and the promise of new discoveries awaited at the next turn in the road. Khalil took a deep breath, feeling the vibrant energy of the room as the conversation with journalists and academics continued. Despite the enthusiasm surrounding him, an uneasiness settled in his chest. He realized that the journey he had begun was not just about archaeological discoveries, but about the search for the truth that could redefine humanity's understanding. What he had presented that night was just the tip of the iceberg, an opening for a dialogue that needed to be deepened. As he moved away from the crowd, Khalil found a quiet corner of the auditorium. He sat on a bench, allowing himself a moment of reflection. There was so much to consider. The inscriptions they found on Mount Hermon were not just enigmatic symbols. They were fragments of a historical narrative that, if pieced together, could illuminate the murky relationship between the Nephilim and the history of humanity. What shaped our history? He questioned, the words reverberating in his mind. The answer lay in the interactions between human beings and those he was beginning to understand as entities from another dimension. The Nephilim were not just mythological figures, he thought. They were an intrinsic part of our past, and their actions reverberate to this day. Khalil remembered the conversations he had with Layla and his colleagues during the expedition. Each of them brought unique perspectives that, together, formed a complex mosaic of understanding. They were not just archaeologists searching for artifacts, they were explorers of a deeper truth, a truth that could unveil what truly happened in ancient times. The connection between cultures was fascinating. Khalil had shown how the Nephilim narrative extended across various civilizations. The giants mentioned in the legends of Sumer, the biblical accounts, and even the stories of indigenous civilizations that spoke of beings who descended from the heavens. How can we ignore this evidence? He asked himself. Every account, every symbol was an echo of a time when humans interacted with beings that defied comprehension. Khalil felt an impulse to share this vision with the world. He didn't want his discoveries to be just another chapter in a forgotten history book. He wanted people to connect with this narrative, to question the truths they had always accepted. "We must reevaluate what we know," he murmured to himself. "We need to look at the past with new eyes." When he finally decided to return to the group, he came across Layla, who was waiting for him with a radiant smile. "Khalil, you are incredible. People are really interested in your ideas." She spoke enthusiastically, her eyes shining with the possibility of a future full of discoveries. Khalil smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew the real challenge was just beginning. "We need to continue this conversation," he replied, his voice charged with determination. "What we found on Mount Hermon is just a start. We have to explore more, investigate more, and most importantly, question more." Layla nodded, sensing the depth of the resolution he was expressing. "I'm with you. Let's organize more expeditions, bring in more researchers, and who knows, maybe even open an online forum to discuss these ideas." The idea of an online forum ignited a new flame in Khalil. It was a way to gather people from different parts of the world who were drawn to these questions. "We can create a community in search of the truth," he said, imagining the possibilities. "A space where everyone can share their discoveries, theories, and, above all, their questions." As the two talked, Khalil realized that the responsibility he felt was not only his. That journey was collective, and the truth they sought was a human quest. "Who are we, and where do we come from?" was a question that couldn't be answered by a single individual, but by all. Those willing to investigate, question, and learn. The night advanced, and the echoes of his presentation still resonated on the auditorium walls. Khalil felt he had sown a seed of curiosity and questioning. He was determined to water that seed, to nurture the search for the truth that could change the narrative of history. The flood wasn't just a cataclysmic event, he thought, remembering the implications of his discoveries. It was a response to a threat we still don't fully understand. As he said goodbye to his colleagues, Khalil felt a wave of hope. He dreamed of a future where the questions that arose were no longer avoided, but explored with courage and curiosity. "The truth is often stranger than fiction," he reflected, recognizing the depth of the journey that awaited him. Khalil said goodbye to Layla, promising they would meet again to discuss the next steps. Leaving the auditorium, he looked at the stars shining brightly in the night sky. He knew that the search for truth wouldn't end there. It was just the beginning of a new era of discoveries. Whatever the Nephilim represented, he was determined to unearth their truths and invite the world to join him on that journey. With a heart full of determination and a renewed spirit of curiosity, Khalil moved forward, ready to face the challenges that would come, always with the hope that at the end of his search, the story that emerged would not only reveal the mysteries of the past, but also illuminate the path for the future. "We must always question," he whispered to himself, "because the truth, however strange, is what makes us human." And so, under the starry cloak of night, Khalil walked away, not just as an archaeologist, but as a defender of the search for truth, committed to exploring the complexities of history and inviting others to do the same.